Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Language Lady. I'm your host, Dr. Hempel, and today I am going to do How Do I Become a Teacher tag. I want to thank Too Cool for Middle School for starting this tag. And if you are not familiar with my channel and who I am, I'm Dr. Hempel, and I'm an ESL middle school teacher in the state of Pennsylvania, and I post videos every week on strategies and resources for teachers who teach students who speak another language. So I'm going to go and hop right into it in this teacher tag. So the first question that's been asked is, did I always know that I wanted to become a teacher? I pretty much knew that I wanted to become a teacher. Who really inspired me was an aunt that she's no longer living, but one of my great aunts in Puerto Rico. I used to visit her every summer, and she was a special ed teacher, and I saw her connection with students, and I was just fascinated with the rapport that she had. And initially I thought I was going to go into special education. I have a sister who has special needs. But as I continued in my journey, as I'll get into later on, I realized that students who speak other languages is more of my passion, so I decided to go that route. But to be honest, in my very beginning journey, I thought that I was going to go into science. I loved science. I wanted to be an astronaut. And there is a part of me that still is drawn to the scientific world, but I also really enjoy filming and art and music and acting. So there's always that interest, and I think that's kind of like why I like YouTube so much, is because I enjoy that creative side. But pretty much I've always known that I wanted to. So what was my major when I was in college? My major was actually psychology. At that time, I thought that psychology would be a very good way to understand my students and just understand them as a whole. And to be honest, when I look back on majoring in psychology, it was a very difficult major to have in conjunction with elementary education, because it really felt like I was double majoring. And I actually ended up having to drop the teacher practicum portion of the education program because it was just too much to handle. So what ended up happening was, when I graduated, I got a job as a paraprofessional in an elementary school in Boston. Actually, it was outside of Boston, and I did that, and that's how I was able to make up my hours. So I was working while picking up my practicum hours, and within that same year, my principal told me, you're ready to become a teacher. I could see you being in your own classroom. So that's actually how I fell into the world of bilingual education. She said that there was an opening in a Portuguese bilingual class, and that's how I started my journey. I fell in love with my students. My students were from Brazil and Angola, and at that time I had the opportunity to pursue my master's in bilingual education, and that's the rest of the story. The rest of my story goes there. So it was really interesting that having that experience of working in that environment. So the next question is, what kind of requirements does your state have for teachers? Did you have to do observation hours, student teaching? So I didn't do all of that here in the state of Pennsylvania. I actually did that in Massachusetts. But for the state of Pennsylvania, you do have to enroll in a teacher preparation program, and embedded within the teacher preparation program, they do have practicum hours where you do get to student teach and have that opportunity to work with a seasoned teacher and get the experience of being in the classroom. Once you make up all of your hours or your credits, then there is a test that you do take so that you become certified. There's a generic one for elementary teachers and secondary, and then one specific for content teacher if you're specialized in an area like for high school, like social studies, or at the middle school level, or science or math, and etc. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. In terms of observation hours, as I mentioned before, yes, I don't know how many there are in the state of Pennsylvania, but I will link below the Pennsylvania requirements for teaching. Question number 4 is, how did you decide which age group that you wanted to teach? When I started off with my teaching journey, I wanted to work with children, small children. So my first teaching experience was actually with kindergarten. And the reason why I chose that age group is that because I play the guitar, and not that you can't do that with middle school and high school, but I just felt like it lent itself a lot easily, and just my personality was more connected with children than older students. At the beginning, I just felt like that would be, it was intimidating, the idea of teaching older kids. Now, 20 years later, I can't even imagine myself teaching children. I mean, if I had to, I could, but I actually love working with older students. It was about maybe 3 or 4 years ago that I started my journey in secondary education, and I absolutely love it. I don't want to go back to elementary education. I think that working with younger children is wonderful, but I just love the maturity level of older students, that you can joke with them and it doesn't go over their head. And there's just certain aspects of their personality, or just where they are socio-emotionally and intellectually, that they're more prepared to do other things. So one of my goals is to exclusively teach high school at some point. And I feel like I would really enjoy that as well. But right now I'm enjoying middle school, and it's been a great experience. Question number 5, did I do any substitute teaching? No, I did not. I got my first, as I said before, as soon as I graduated from my bachelor's degree, I went straight into as a para because I did not have the practicum hours to teach, and I've been doing that ever since. I think that substitute teachers are amazing. I think they're brave. It's not easy to go into a different setting, classroom every day, different classroom, learn their procedures. When the students don't really have a relationship with you yet, I applaud them. I think they're amazing, and they really should be recognized for their hard work and their ability to be flexible and to work in different settings every single day. Question number 6 is, what was the process for applying for my first teaching position? So when I was in the process of graduating from my bachelor's degree, remember, I was doing solely psychology, so I didn't have the practicum hours necessary to get a certificate in education. So I had to just call around different schools, and that was very nerve-wracking, because right now as a teacher now, I'm a lot more confident, and I don't have no problem walking into different schools and introducing myself. Back then, I didn't know where to begin, so I just called several schools and just explained to them my unique position. And I was very, very fortunate that there was a principal outside of Boston that was open to the idea of me working as a paraprofessional and to work in that setting. And like I said before, it ended up turning into something wonderful, because within that same year, she promoted me to teaching. I had made up all those hours, and I submitted that to the state of Massachusetts, and she said, and it was funny, it was an overnight thing. She said, starting next Monday, it was like a Thursday, I think, she said, you're going to be teaching in our Portuguese bilingual program. And I was so nervous and so stressed out, but it ended up being the most amazing experience. I will never forget, because I know that it was meant to be, because of that job, it's when because before that I had never thought about ESL. Because when I went to school thinking that I was just going to teach straight elementary education classes, mainstream classes, not a specialization in ESL. So it ended up being a great experience. But and I want to encourage you that take risks, take challenges, try something different, because you never know, it might stick. You have these preconceived notions that you're not going to like something, but it can end up being something that you end up doing for the rest of your life. So I highly encourage you to consider that. Question number 7 is, what were common interview questions that I've had? So I've been very lucky to have a lot of different teaching experiences with different grades within my 20 years of experience. And I've also had the opportunity to work 6 years in administration, so I've also had that experience. But it doesn't matter whether I've worked in administration or whether I've worked as a teacher. One of the common questions that have been asked of me is, why that particular school district? Why do I want to teach there? So I think it's really important that before you apply for a job, that you really get to know that particular, or before you go into the interview, that you really get to know that school district. What makes it unique, and why do you think that you would be a great fit? Don't just apply for them because they have an opening. Really get to know that district and inside and out, because you want to make sure that it's also a right fit for you. I would say another question that's commonly asked is, what is your classroom management style? I've also been asked, what is your philosophy of teaching, and what is your understanding of theory, and how will you apply it to the classroom? I would say another common question that is also asked is, how do you establish rapport with the students and their families? And there's an increasingly big issue within the United States, and I'm pretty sure in other countries as well, is mental health. How do you balance that? Getting to know students' mental health issues, the crisis that we're experiencing now in the United States. How do you negotiate that and be a strong teacher as well? And I will also say that technology is really important. I've seen that question a lot too. How are you going to use technology? How do you make it innovative? How do you balance traditional teaching versus technology? So I would say that on the top of my head. And for those of you who may be interested in going into ESL, they probably would ask you questions like, what makes an ESL classroom welcoming? What kind of strategies will you use for English language learners? And how will you work with content teachers? I think that's a big one, because let's be realistic, with the growing numbers of language learners in the United States and around the world, it won't always be a perfect fit where ESL students will have an ESL teacher all day long. They will also be working with content teachers. So school districts are going to be looking for how well you're able to collaborate. Are you willing to provide professional development? ESL teaching is really unique because you become staff developers as well as being a teacher, and you're also advocating. So how will you advocate for your English language learners? How will you connect with their families? And how will you share that information with the teachers that you work with? Question number 8 is, what was my first teaching job? My first teaching job was, as I said before, if we want to talk about as a paraprofessional, I was working in a first grade classroom, and it had a mixture of ESL kids, and it also had students who were native English speakers. In the actual job that within that same year, my principal approached me and said I was ready to be in a classroom setting. So what I did is I worked in a kindergarten and first grade combined Portuguese bilingual classroom. So not only was I not prepared for the idea of teaching bilingual education just yet, because I had not started my master's program in bilingual education, but I also didn't know how I was going to negotiate kindergarten, first grade. Do I teach to the top, or do I teach to the lower grades? It was challenging, and I made it work, but it was definitely a growing process. So that was my first actual teaching position, was kindergarten, first grade Portuguese bilingual teacher. Question number 9 is, what did I feel prepared for my first teaching job? What did I not feel prepared for? So I kind of answered that in question 8. I'll answer what I did not feel prepared for is the issue that I had 2 different grade levels in the same classroom. I was so afraid, and the reason why they did that is because they did not have enough teachers for every grade level. So they were expanding their bilingual program. It was a transitional bilingual program in which you started with the student's native language and then you slowly progress into English. That's where I had a disadvantage because I did not speak Portuguese. I speak Spanish and English. So I was actually not really following the model that they were teaching. I was doing English immersion with support and visuals and all of the different things that I talk about on my channel. And it was really interesting because my students really grew. By the end of the school year, both my kindergarten and first grade students were talking, they were writing, but I also attribute to the fact that all of them, except 1 or 2 students, and we're talking about over 20 years ago, were not strong in their native language, but the majority of them were. And I think that attribute, and they really wanted to learn. And I made it engaging. We did a lot of music and a lot of interactive activities, but I would have to say that was something that was really nerve-wracking for me is, how I wasn't prepared for teaching 2 different grade levels. What I was prepared for was the routines and the structures and where to get resources, because I had worked with that wonderful teacher in the beginning of the year in the first grade class, so I had kind of adopted and collected so many different resources in terms of books. I had access to different websites, and I knew what the beginning, the middle, the end of a lesson should look like. I knew that had to be in place, and I knew how to organize my classroom to make it accessible for my students. So that was a plus, and I really encourage you that when you do have the opportunity to work alongside with another teacher, take them aside, ask them lots of questions, and take the opportunity. If you're too afraid to teach for a whole day, then take one lesson at a time. I was very intimidated by that fact as well, because actually when I was in college, I had the opportunity to, and I didn't take it. I was too afraid, and it wasn't until later on that then I started teaching a small group. But just move yourself, make that your goal, to just do in baby steps. Go from teaching a small group to teaching a portion of a lesson to the whole class, and moving forward. You will, as soon as you get your feet wet, it gets easier and easier as you go along. Question number 10 is, what advice would I give to people who are thinking about becoming teachers and are on their journey to becoming a teacher? I would say the biggest thing is to never let go of the reason why you want to become a teacher. And I know that you go to school and you're learning to become a teacher, but once you really enter the classroom, the reality sets in, and there's things that a college education just doesn't prepare you for. So I think it's really important just to think about the realities of it, but be patient with yourself and know that there's so much to learn, and just give yourself one or two goals. Don't try to do it all. Try to do one thing and just be kind to yourself. I think that we want to do our very, very best, and we're really difficult and hard on ourselves. I know that I am. I tend to be a perfectionist. And I also think it's really important is to talk to different teachers and ask what their experiences are. And I would also recommend to start gathering resources. And I think that teachers nowadays are at such an advantage, because we never had, when I started teaching, we didn't have resources like teacher pay teachers or anything like that. So I think it's really important to don't leave yourself alone. Don't stay in your own world. Like, definitely network and collaborate with different teachers. And I also would recommend to be on top of what's going on in education. So read articles, be a member of different organizations, just so that you can be on top of what's going on, so that you can make an impact. And I also would encourage you is to really think about students who live in poverty, students who live in have different experiences. Go outside of yourself and in your everyday experiences, and go to different neighborhoods and read different books, or watch documentaries if you can, and just have an open mind, and just remember every single day why you chose this profession. Don't give up, and know that you are going to make a difference, and that you can do this. So that's it. Those are my 10 questions to the How Did I Become a Teacher tag. I hope you enjoyed this. As I mentioned before, I post a new video every week on Wednesdays on ESL strategies. Please comment below if there's a specific topic that you would like me to cover in a future videos. Thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you so much for liking and for commenting. It means so much. For those of you who may not know, I have an Instagram page by the same name. It is called The Language Lady, and I get to really interact and get to know a lot of you that way. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.